In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Lord, you send out your Spirit, and they will be created. Let us pray. Father, you taught the hearts of faithful people by sending the body of the Holy Spirit. And that same Spirit, give us right joy, who enjoy your comfort and guidance. We ask of this through Christ our Lord. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end.
Christ our King. Virgin most prudent Mary, Mother of the Church.
Pray for us.
So, like is doing a lot better. It's 100% again. Maybe some of you remember me struggling up these steps the last time. I think it was the last time. Anyway, so straining these got better. Facing some confusing times, should we say? Confusing times, trying times, difficult times. And the thing to remember is what Jesus said in the gospel, it was like 2 days ago. He said, the kingdom of Christ is among you. And that's like, we form the kingdom of Christ. And all week in the Gospels, he's been telling us what the kingdom of Christ is like, and how powerful it is, and how it can go from being a tiny seed, like a mustard seed, into being something huge very quickly. I mean, mustard grows from a seed that's the size of a period at the end of a sentence. It can grow from that size up to like 8 feet in just one season. So it grows incredibly fast. And what Jesus is trying to tell us is that things can turn around really quickly. You know, so we always worry about this, and we worry about that, and we worry about the other thing. And here's the thing, I mean, I understand, there's always going to be difficulties. There's always going to be problems. And we're kind of in a privileged place because we live in a country where we've been kind of protected our whole lives. And, you know, pretty much we can have things the way we want. Whereas you look around at other countries in the world and it hasn't been like that. And so we get into a situation that's a little bit difficult. I remember looking, you know, in other countries and saying like, wow, they have that problem, how are they going to deal with that? That must be hard for people there. And it's always been other places. And lately, it's been more and more here. And maybe it's going to get even more here. But it's okay because we're part of the kingdom. And we are in the palm of his hand. You have to remember, no matter what, we're in the palm of his hand. And whatever happens, it's going to be for our good. Sometimes it might be something that I prefer doesn't happen, but it's still going to be for my good. I mean, how many times I can look back at lots of things in my life, and at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I wish this wasn't happening. Lord, please end this as soon as possible. But I ended up being a way better person because of it. And so if we deal with these problems, these difficulties in the right way, we'll come out of it being better. We'll come out of it being more and more the people he wants us to be, the saints he wants us to be. And we should know by now because we have done the thing that other people do, where we put our faith in something besides Christ. You know, missionary of Christ, founder was a saint. Wow, he's a saint, and he's doing this, and he's doing that, and he's so wonderful, and everything like that. And it turned out, no, I couldn't put my faith in him. And maybe a lot of people who put their faith in him are the people who want to hear him more, whether they're missionaries or members of Reigning Christian, because they put their faith in the founder. And they learn the hard way, and you can't do that. I learned the hard way, you can't do that. And over again, we're tempted to put our faith in something besides God. I put my faith in a certain leader. I put my faith in a certain institution. I put my faith in whatever. And the only person you can trust in is Jesus. The only institution you can trust in is his church. The church will always give us what we need in order to get to heaven. So we have to, whenever there's a trial or a problem like this, it's an invitation from Christ, like Stop putting your trust in human beings. Stop putting your trust in institutions and put your trust in me. And the more we trust in him, the more we'll be able to handle things. You read books like Walter Chiswick's book, I forget the name of it now. The first one was with God in Russia, the wrote another one that was better. Anyway, somebody said, he leadeth me, yeah. You read a book like He Leadeth Me, and what do you find out about Walter Chiswick? He put his faith in himself. And he put his faith in himself until, while he was in Russia, the KGB broke him down to nothing. And they got him to the point where he was willing to do whatever they asked him to do. And he realized that that wasn't what he was supposed to be like. And he said, okay, what I need to do is put my trust in God, because he thought of Jesus in Gethsemane. What happened to Jesus in Gethsemane? He put all of his trust in the Father's will. And so Walter Chiswick said, okay, whatever God's will is, that's what's going to be the best. And so whatever happened, he took his being God's will and he just rolled with it. And they finally had to drive out of Russia because he was converting too many people. They couldn't stop him anymore. Before when he was trusting in himself, he wasn't converting anybody. And then afterwards, he was converting people all over the place until they finally threw him out of the country. His family had been dead. He'd been declared dead 15 years before, because he disappeared into Russia in the Second World War. And there was no news from him after, like 1942 or something like that. There was no news. And so they assumed he was dead, and he got killed in the war somehow. And all of a sudden, in 1962, he shows up. He'd be declared dead in, I think, 47. In 1962, he shows up at the airport, in New York City, calls his sister, and she comes to pick him up, and there he was. And then he wrote the book He Leadeth Me, because he put his trust in God. And so that's what we have to do, and it's hard. I mean, he had to be broken down to nothing before he did it, but then he did it. And these difficulties in our lives are things where God says, all right, I'm taking away something you put your trust in, because you're putting your trust in something besides me. So I'm going to take it away now, so we can put your trust in me. And that's what we have to do, is we have to put our trust in God. No matter what happens, if God allows it, then it's something that's going to work out better for us if we just learn how to trust in him. If we don't trust in him, it can turn out to be a real disaster. We put our trust in him. I remember a couple months ago, I think it was, maybe it wasn't you. I remember those saying on several different occasions that, all right, everybody, we've got an election coming out, we better be praying. And hopefully you're all praying. And if we're all praying, then this is going to work out. And if we weren't all praying, well, then maybe it's not. But if we were all praying, then it's going to work out, because God's going to make sure the good comes out of everything that happens. But part of that depends on me. How am I going to react to what happens? How am I going to live it? Because that's a lot of what brings the good out of it. So anyway, that's enough about that. That's not really what the retreat's about. But it seems like, we've been getting lots of questions about those kinds of things lately. And so, it's good to talk about this. When I pray, just, with a childlike trust, put myself in God's hands, because I'm really in his hands anyway. The problem is we're always trying to climb out and do things on our own or whatever. I put myself in his hands and just trust in him. Things always work out. So, I guess that's all I have to say about that. It's probably already too much. So, what we came here today to talk about was first steps in prayer and beyond. And so we've been talking about prayer and different things that have to do with prayer, problems in prayer and things like that. Now we need to talk about some basics, because a lot of us know these basics, but hopefully there's something here that everybody can make use of. That some parts might apply to some people more, other parts to other people more. So first steps in prayer and beyond. So let's talk about first steps in prayer. I don't know how many people here consider themselves beginners. There might be some here. Usually one of the first things we do when you join up is we give you the first steps. We'll just go over it in case we need to cover that again right now. So every day I should do meditation. St. Teresa of Avila, who is the church's foremost expert on prayer, says, if you do 15 minutes of meditation every day, I can guarantee you go to heaven. And if you don't do it, I can guarantee you won't. So that's pretty powerful coming from the church's foremost expert on prayer. So these are steps for doing a meditation for somebody who hasn't done one before. So the first step is to concentrate, right? I recognize that God is truly present, that he's listening to me, that he's watching over me. Oh, by the way, these are taken from Father Bartunik's book, The Better Part. It's the first part of the book. Afterwards, he published another book, which was just that part. I forget the name of that one, but it's in the Better Part, and it's in this other book too. So I concentrate, and first of all, I make the presence of God. I recognize that God is here with me. God is always, and here we have him right here with us in the Eucharist, but even if we're by ourselves in our room, God is with me. He's always with me. I'm the one who forgets. It's not him. He's always aware that I'm around, but I'm the one who forgets. But in order to pray, I need to be aware of his presence. And sometimes people say, Father, I'm not sure if I'm really praying. Okay, there's one criteria to know if you're praying or not. If you are aware of God's presence, you're praying. And when you forget that God is here, you're not praying anymore. Because it's a conversation. It's like if I'm up here talking to you while the microphone is on, that works, because you don't forget that I'm up here. And so I'm up here talking, and the Father's talking, okay, well, this is good. And so there's communication going on. But if the mic were to go off, or if I were to finish my talk and turn off the mic, but still be standing up here, you might realize, okay, well, the talk is over. And so now I'm going to start doing other things. You might not necessarily be out of the church, but you might be focused on reading something or praying a rosary or something like that. So even though I'm still up here, you're not paying attention to me anymore. There's no communication going on. And that's the same thing in prayer. When I'm aware that God is here, I pray. No matter what I'm doing, as long as I have that awareness. When I forget he's here, I'm not praying. If I get distracted with what I have to do today, if I get distracted with thinking about what the family needs, if I get distracted with whatever, at that point I'm not praying anymore. If I've forgotten that God is present. So the first step, always the first thing to do in prayer, remember that God is here with me. Second, well, this is still the first step, but there's different parts of it. So this is another part of it, another aspect. Jesus, you have something to say to me. You made this appointment. He always has something to say to me. It's not like, hey, Jesus, I came to talk to you, and he's like, no, I don't really have anything for you today. You can go do something else. That never happens. He has something for me every day, and it's always worthwhile. He's the one. He's the one. I mean, I should be interested in the prayer time too, but he's the one who's interested in it because he's the one who's been waiting for me. I'm the one who forgets about him. He's always aware of me and trying to give me grace and blessing and everything. I'm the one who forgets that he's around. So it's an appointment that he made. I need to hear your word from me today. Because every day it's different. We might have days that are very similar, but we might find in 2 days that we expect to be very similar. Jesus tells us something very different at the beginning. Then one day he tells me one thing to focus on this, and another day he tells me to focus on that. But my plans for the day maybe are almost the same plans. So I need to hear what he wants to say to me today, and how I'm supposed to serve him today. Because it might be that even though my plans for the day are very similar, the way he wants me to approach it is very different. And then I ask for the grace that I need. A lot of times there's graces that we need. And it doesn't mean that we have to meditate on that particular subject, but we might know. Father James got up this morning and was praying for the grace to give a good talk, because I knew I was going to be giving a talk this morning. So when I prayed this morning, what I was saying to God was, help me to really listen to what you want to say to these people so that I can tell them what you want. So that was the grace I asked for this morning. Tomorrow will be different grace because I won't have this to do tomorrow. And so sometimes we can foresee there's something specific I need to do today, and I really need God's support in that. And so we ask him for that grace. And another day, we might not see anything specific, and we might just say, Lord, I don't see anything special today, but you know what I need, so please give me the graces that I'm going to need to get through this day. Sometimes there's unforeseen things. I remember September 11th, 2001, I got up in the morning, everything was great. Then pretty soon, planes started hitting buildings, and there were unforeseen things that happened that day. And I didn't realize I was going to need graces to be able to deal with those things. But in the morning when I did my prayer, Jesus knew that. I'm sure he gave me graces then to help me get through the day and help me deal with that. I had all these spiritual directions lined up at the retreat center. I was in Washington, D.C., practically ground zero. Everybody talks about ground zero in New York, but New York doesn't have, the only ground zero. D.C. had ground zero too. I was 12 miles from ground zero. And so, I called my scheduler, the person who did the schedule for me, and I said, look, I will be there for spiritual direction if people want to come in, but I understand if people are too shaken that they don't want to come in. But other people, maybe what they really want to do is talk to me today. So I'm available for whoever wants it. So I went in, and some people came in and some people canceled, but we all managed to get through that day, and here we are, almost 20 years later, and facing different crises. But that day we had one very specific that we needed grace for, and we asked God for grace, maybe generically in the morning. It's good if you know something specific to say it. But if you don't really see anything, you say, well, whatever graces I need today. And know that if you ask for a specific grace because it's what you foresee for the day, and he knows, something like September 11th is going to happen or whatever, he'll still give you the other graces too. It's not like he's just like, nobody asked me for graces for September 11th, so I guess everybody's on their own, No, he's up there taking care of us. He's going to bless us, give us what we need. But obviously, sometimes there's things that are obvious to us that we need to reach out for that. Excuse me. So that's the first part, is concentrate. What are the attitudes, what are the thoughts that I need to have to get this started well? Number 2, consider. We always talk about choosing a text to meditate on. You don't always have to have a text. Sometimes you can freestyle it and it'll be fine, especially if you have experience, but in the beginning it's good to have a text. So a lot of people use the gospel of the day, you can do that. Or you can have some spiritual book, like The Imitation of Christ. There's lots of little nuggets in there that you can use. But the thing is like, if you were going to meet somebody new today, somebody you hadn't met before, and you're going to have to spend some time with them, you would wonder, what is this person interested in? So we can talk about that. I used to talk about, what if it was going to be John Paul II? Well, I know John Paul II likes to ski, and maybe I like to ski, so I can talk about skiing, because that's something we have in common. When I use the gospel, when I use a spiritual book, I'm picking up something that I know is going to be of interest to God. And so I go through that text until I get something that seems interesting to me, and that's something we have in common to talk about. And so that would be a good thing to base my meditation on. And so usually we tell people, take the gospel, or if you're using some spiritual book like the Imitation of Christ, read through it slowly until you find something that strikes you. And try to get like 3 of those. Because sometimes what strikes me at the beginning doesn't give me actually that much material. It gives me a couple minutes, and then I'm done or I go something else. If I'm trying to pin my whole meditation on it, it might not be enough. So I read the text slowly and calmly, looking for the Holy Spirit's highlights. If at first nothing strikes me, then I'll reread the text and I'll start asking questions. So I might use my imagination to put myself in the scene of the gospel. And so I don't remember the gospel book because I come in so early, I did somewhere in my master's, so I don't know what today's gospel is. But whatever today's gospel was, I'm sure Jesus did something, and I suppose the apostles were there and everything. So what is Jesus doing? Why is he doing it? What is he saying? Why is he saying it? Who's he talking to? And all these questions. I know you did the Emmaus before, so it's like, here's Jesus with these 2 guys. And you can ask questions about the 2 guys too. So what are these 2 guys doing and why are they doing it? It's like they've given up on the resurrection. And it's funny because as you tell the story, it's like they're telling Jesus who they don't realize it's Jesus, right? They're saying like, okay, well, he says, well, what are you talking about? He says, well, we're talking about Jesus now. And here's the thing, it's like, you thought he was the Messiah that they crucified him a few days ago. But he did say he was going to rise again on the 3rd day. And today is the 3rd day. And there were some women went to the tomb, and they did see angels. Studies are more unusual all the time. They did see angels who said that he had already risen from the dead, but we figure it's all over, so we're going home. So it's like, you ask yourself questions like that, and you can wonder then, it's like, what's going on with these guys? Because it seems like they have everything that they need to tell them you should be sticking around. Because something is always starting to happen and you don't want to miss out. But they're not doing it. And that tells you how hard-headed people are in believing in the resurrection. Jesus said he's going to rise from the dead. People don't rise from the dead. Yeah, there were some women who went to the tomb, it's the third day, and they did see angels who said he was risen, but that stuff doesn't happen. So you get an insight into these people by doing that. And you put yourself in the scene and you try and live the scene with Jesus and with the different people who are in the gospel. So I can ask myself who, what, when, where, and why, all the good journalistic questions. How? I see the people, I listen to the words, I observe their actions. What strikes me? What is God saying to me? He might be saying, don't be a lunkhead like these two guys, They have everything that they need in order to believe, and they don't believe. And maybe there's certain things in my life, when I read that passage, maybe there's certain things in my life going on where I don't have the faith that I should be having. And Jesus is saying, you're kind of like these two guys. He's telling me to wise up because I have everything. I didn't put the pieces together in my life. I'll see something that I didn't see before. Because that's what these guys are doing. They have all the pieces, it's obvious. They're just not putting them together. Then I can use my reason to dig into it. I tell, when I started doing meditations, the first things I did was, I kind of worked my way through the Gospels, just to find Gospels. But then I started to use study Bibles, things with commentaries, to allow me to go deeper and deeper. Because, I went through them the first time and I got the stuff that I could get without any commentaries. But then I went through one study Bible that had a certain set of notes and commentaries there, and that helped me to go deeper. And I switched to use a different study Bible that had different commentaries that helped me go deeper still. And so we can do that in order to get different things out of the gospel. Sometimes people worry, it's like, I've already meditated on this gospel, it's going to be one. Holy Spirit has something different to say every time. And not only that, but by using different study Bibles and things like that, you can get different things. You give the Holy Spirit some help, because some study Bibles will look more at one kind of thing, and some will look at another kind of thing. If you have one of our previous book that we don't mention, what does he do? He takes each gospel and looks at it at least 4 different ways. Jesus as a friend, Jesus as a teacher, I forget all of them, but he's 4 different things. And so you can go through the Gospels one time and just look at his notes on Jesus as a teacher and get one set of things out about Jesus as a teacher. And then the next time you can go through and look at it as Jesus as a friend. And so you can spend years going through the Gospels before you finish up the Father Bartolu's book. And then there's other books as well that will help us to be able to meditate on the Gospels and get a lot out of them. Like I said, then you can use other things too if you don't use the Gospel. But this, right here, we're just focusing on that. So what strikes me in each Gospel? What does it mean? What does it tell me about Christ? Christ's patience with these two guys going to Emmaus. The whole time he's talking to them, they don't realize it's him. They really don't believe in the resurrection. And Jesus is explaining things to them. And they're even saying wow, didn't our hearts burn? And it's I haven't heard anybody talk like this since Jesus. Well, of course it's not him, probably. No, it's him. But so you see what's going on in their minds, and you try to understand it better. Because the more we understand the Gospels, the more we understand Christ. And the more we understand him, the more we love him. And so this is just a way, this meditation leads us to a deeper love of Christ, besides other things. What does it tell me about Christ? What does it tell me about the church, about the meaning of life, about how to be a Christian? What does it mean for me? Like I said before, Christ has something very specific he's saying to me in it. What is its relevance in terms of my responsibilities, my vocation, my struggles, and my spiritual program? If nothing strikes me, I move on to the next text. So it might be like in the Gospel of Emmaus, there's something that struck me at the beginning, and I meditated on that for a little while, and I started to run out of things. When you run out of things, sometimes what you need to do is go back and read the verse again, because it's not so much that Jesus isn't talking to you about it anymore, but it's because I'm just getting distracted. And so how do I get out of distractions? I go back to that verse that struck me, that touched my heart, that meant something to me. And a lot of times that'll pull me back in. If I go back to the verse and read it again and it doesn't pull me back in, then I move to another verse. Find another verse that helps me to talk to him, that really seems to touch me deeply, touches my heart. So the first point is consider, or concentrate. The second point is consider. Third is converse. I need to talk to Jesus. It's not just me analyzing the gospel. If I'm just analyzing, I get to the point where I forget that he's present. And then I'm not praying anymore. I'm doing a theological study of this gospel or something like that, maybe, but I'm not praying anymore. And these aren't like steps that are always totally separate. They do kind of follow, like, first is going to be concentrated, then consider, and then converse. But sometimes they're happening at the same time, right? Like the presence of Christ is something that should be happening throughout the whole meditation. So it's not something that's like, okay, I did that, and now I can go past that. No, you have to maintain the presence of Christ in order to pray. So what do I want to say to Jesus about this point that's touched me? Sometimes I need to talk to him about it. I savor what God is telling me. I thank you. That was so helpful, Jesus. This is going to help me be a better person. It's going to follow you better. I respond in my heart with my own words, expressing myself naturally with praise, adoration, sorrow for my sins, thanksgiving, or petition. Because there's different ways to pray, right? There's different kinds of praise. There's praise for God's goodness and love, adoration, reaffirming my willingness to follow him, sorrow for my sins and selfishness, thanksgiving for his gifts. Maybe it's like, oh, this gospel reminds me of these gifts, or a specific gift that God has given me. Sometimes, just to go into the chapel and sit there, and just to be at peace and think, like, what a wonderful life God is giving me. Sure, I've had problems and things like that. But he's loved me every step of the way. And I've been able to serve him and do things, for him that are worthwhile things. That really are a source of happiness for me. Because, that's when we get happiness. Happiness is when you can look back at some sacrifice that you made and say, hey, that was really worthwhile. And there's a deep satisfaction in that moment that actually never goes away. But you can go back to it. I'm sure all of you have things in your lives where you did something. It was a sacrifice for you, but it was good for somebody else, it was good for God. And every time you go back and think about that, you feel this deep satisfaction again. That is the true meaning of happiness. Because nobody can ever take that away from me. I can access that anytime, any place. You can have fun. You can go ride on a roller coaster and it's fun, but as soon as you get off the roller coaster, it's over. You can think about the roller coaster and say, well, that was fun, but you're not having fun again just by thinking about the roller coaster. You have to go back and get online again or go to another one and ride it again in order to have fun again. But in order to be happy, all you have to do is remember some sacrifice, something worthwhile that you did that helped somebody else, even if they didn't seem very grateful. So yeah, that was really good for that person. They never thanked me. They know that was really helpful for them. And you feel this satisfaction, this happiness, that nothing can ever take away from you. So, thanksgiving. Or petition, asking for good things. Obviously, there's times when you need things. And it's not like, oh, it's bad to ask for stuff or anything like that, because that's selfish. It's not selfish. God wants us to ask for the things that we need. It's not like you should be asking for luxuries or something like that. But when we ask for the things that we actually do need, the things that are good for us, God likes to hear us ask for those things. Because what does that say? It says, I am serious about my mission, about what God wants me to do in this life. And this thing that's going to help me to do that, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's just a nice meal. Because this nice meal that I had, in spite of the fact that I enjoyed it and everything like that, it's also something that gives me the nourishment and the strength that I need to serve God. And so just to give thanksgiving for the fact that I really enjoyed this meal that I had today. Can it help me to serve God more? Or asking Him, oh, Lord, help me instead of like eating junk food like I do sometimes, help me to make sure I'm eating something that's going to help me serve you better. And so all these things, praise, adoration, sorrow, thanksgiving, and petition, are all perfectly good for prayer, but try not to do just one. Sometimes it's just like petition. Oh, Lord, I'm going to do this the next time. Lord, give me this. Lord, give me this. We should have a mixture of all of them, but that's not to say what the proportion should be, because it depends on what God wants you to pray about today. And so it might be like, before I came in here, while Mass was going on, I went in the other chapel, and I was doing that prayer of thanksgiving that I was just telling you about how great my life is, and how much God has blessed me in my life, and just being thankful for that. And feeling very close to Him, and feeling His love, because, when you have a prayer of thanksgiving, it's obvious that the person is giving you a lot of things, and therefore they must love you if they're doing that. How much God must love us because of all the things He gives us. And so I just, without intending to, I intended to be in the chapel, but I didn't say, well, I'm going to go and make a prayer of thanksgiving. But it just struck me at one moment how good God is to me. And so I prayed about that and offered that up. When this starts to settle down, that's time again. Maybe I go back to the text and see if there's more there, or if I go back to the text and there's not more there, then I move on to the next text. And then there's step 4, which is commit. And maybe this is something we forget sometimes. I renew my commitment to follow Christ unconditionally. That's something we want to get from our meditation every morning, is to follow Christ unconditionally today. If we don't get that, we haven't really gotten to the core of what the meditation is about. Because the meditation is supposed to unite my will to God's will. There are a lot of things that happen during the day. Maybe when I get up, there's a lot of things in my heart. It's like, oh, God wants me to do this today, but I really don't feel like it. And so there's not a connect between my will and God's will. But 15 minutes of meditation, this is why St. Teresa of Avila said that. 15 minutes of meditation is enough to get me to the point where my will connects to God's will. And by the time I finish the meditation, I should have the intention of really doing God's will today. A solid intention, not just like, oh, well, I'll kind of try. No. It should be the point like, okay, Lord, I'm going to try and make sure I do everything you asked me to do today. I renew my points of spiritual work or make a new practical resolution for today. There's always, what happened yesterday and I don't want that to happen again today. Or what good happened yesterday that I want to make sure happens again today. So I renew those points of spiritual work. What is that working on? Is there a virtue I'm striving for? How am I going to try to do that virtue today? Because like I said, they kind of foresee the things that are going to happen today. So if I'm trying to live charity, and I know that today I'm going to be around this person who really costs me a lot when it comes to charity, I could say, okay, well, before I get into that situation, I'm going to be around that person, I'm going to take a few minutes of prayer with our Lord and say, okay, Lord, help me to see this situation clearly and to deal with this, because I have a hard time dealing with this person, and if there's something that's starting to aggravate me, help me to realize it and take the appropriate steps. Sometimes I can diffuse a situation by something I say or do. Sometimes I just need to leave. It's not a sin if somebody is making you angry and you have a hard time dealing with this person. It's not a sin to leave if you have a history of blowing up, around this person. Or you have a history where the other person blows up, because I don't want to make them blow up either. It might not necessarily be my fault, but I don't want to make them blow up either. And so, I look at my day and I see, oh, here's a situation where I can practice charity. I want to take the steps that I need to practice charity then. Or humility, maybe there's a certain situation where my pride kind of takes over and I say, okay, well, I have to make sure that doesn't happen. And so on. I thank God for the time of prayer. I look at how the prayer went, and I write down any insights. Sometimes there's things that come in prayer, and it's like, oh my gosh, this has changed my spiritual life entirely. And then we don't write it down, like 10 minutes after, it's like, what was that again? I don't remember what that was. And God made this wonderful gift to us or saying like, hey, God, could you repeat that? Because I wasn't paying attention. People, I don't like to say that to people. I'd rather not say that to people. It's like, yeah, you were talking, but I wasn't really paying attention to you. Could you repeat what you said? I mean, pretty much tell the person that they're not that important to me. So it's good to write down anything that you got out of the person you can remember. And then wrap up the meditation with a prayer. Some people just say Our Father or Hail Mary, or maybe there's something else, some other prayer that I would like to say to close out the meditation. So that's the basics, okay? If somebody is just beginning the meditation, you tell them this. And some of these things we're always going to do in our meditation. But here's the thing, is that as we grow in prayer, our prayer starts to change. And it might not look exactly like this. And this is the problem, is like, these are the steps for beginners. As you progress in prayer, you're not going to slavishly continue to follow these steps. You start to develop your own style. You know, I remember when I started writing, and I do a certain amount of writing. I don't write as much as I should, I should write more. But I started to write, and I talked to somebody who's experienced, and they say, you need to write at least an hour a day. And as you do that, you start to develop your own voice, your own style of writing that people can recognize. And that's a good thing. You don't want your writing just to be like, blah, it could be anybody who wrote this. You want it to be people read it, they say, that's how James, I like the way he writes. Or that's how James, I hate the way he writes. You don't reach anymore, but people like different styles, but if you don't have a style, then kind of everybody struggles with it. Where certain styles, some people like, and other styles, somebody else will like. So, but our prayer is like that, because I have a unique personality. My prayer isn't just generic. I mean, I can pray in Our Father, and that's generic. But if I'm really conversing with God in meditation, I'm really doing mental prayer, like St. Teresa of Avila says, then I am starting to talk about my things, and I'm developing my own voice with the Lord. And so maybe I don't follow these steps exactly. A lot of times I give the example, like we talked about making the presence of God, the first step, concentrating, and being aware of the presence of God. And so what we tell people a lot of times is, well, start off with acts of faith, hope, and love, because that helps us to remember that God is present. We don't necessarily always tell people that. That's maybe something we should do better. But that's the reason why we make the acts of faith, hope, and love at the beginning, at least when we teach people to pray. We make the acts of faith, hope, and love in order to remind ourselves of the presence of God. Well, guess what? There's other ways to do that. And it might be that as you progress, you don't need to make the acts of faith, hope, and love all the time anymore. Maybe you still make them sometimes. But what I noticed as I progressed was that I got to the point where just going to the kneeler and kneeling down, I don't know, just that act of kneeling down, because I did it every morning when I started my meditation, just that act of kneeling down pulled me into the presence of God. And so I found I didn't need to make the acts of faith, hope, and love anymore. I'm not saying like I'm against this or this is what you should do. I'm just saying like my prayer started to develop in that direction. And that's the thing, is that these things, prayer starts out like this. Okay, I'm reading off this page. This is generic meditation. Meditation 101 for people who are just beginners. But then you take it and you make it your own. And as you progress in prayer, your prayer goes in different directions. And little by little, that relationship with God starts to develop to the point where it's just like a friendship. You and I might be friends with the same person, but your friendship with this person is different from my friendship with this person. And the kinds of things we like to do together might be different because that person has different interests. And so in one interest, that person coincides with me, and so when I'm with that person, we like to do this. But when you're with that person, you're not interested in that, and so when you're with that person, you do something else. And that's the way our prayer is. My prayer is an outgrowth of my personality and the way my personality reacts with God. And so it's going to be uniquely my own. That's why this year we're trying to do different people doing meditation at the beginning. So you can see, so like the first one was me. So, okay, this is how Father James does meditation. This is an expression of Father James' personality, the way it reacts when Father James is interacting with God. This is how he expresses his personality. And then we did Kathleen, and Kathleen, we saw like, okay, this is how Kathleen's personality interacts with God. And then this morning we did Lucy. So, okay, this is how Lucy's personality interacts with God, because we want to see, want you to see there's different styles. And you don't have to, some people, they get these things and they think they have to stay with that. And so what they do is they limit their prayer because we could say that this is kind of like for a child. I mean, I don't want to mean that it's childish, it's not childish at all, but you could say it's like having a child's personality, because all children have a personality from the beginning, but their personalities grow and develop as they get older. And that's what you happen with my prayers, it grows and develops. And so this is how you start out at the beginning, and if you limit yourself to this, it's like being a child and growing up, your personality doesn't develop. You continue to have the personality of a child. And so for a long time, I guess, we didn't help people well enough with that because there were a lot of people who thought, oh, well, I was taught these steps, and so if I'm having a problem with prayer, the thing to do is go back and slavishly follow these steps. There could be some problems in prayer where what you need to do is go back to those steps because maybe what I'm doing is being lazy. And so I'm cutting out steps because I'm being lazy in prayer, so my prayer isn't very satisfying. And what I need to do is go back and build my prayer up again. That it might be in certain situations, that's what we need. But what we should expect is as I advance in prayer, it starts to change. Those changes you work out with your spiritual director. That's one of the reasons we really need spiritual directors when we are working in prayer, is to have somebody to help us to see how that should develop and to tell us what's the difference between like being lazy and when Father James decided he wasn't going to do acts of faith, hope, and love anymore because he was entering the presence of God just by kneeling down, was that Father James being lazy, or was that Father James just his prayer was developing in a certain way? And it turns out that was my prayer developing in a certain way. It wasn't just being lazy. Although some people I'd say, I don't feel like doing acts of faith, hope, and love. It takes so long and it's hard to do, so I don't want to do it. Well, that's not developing your prayer. That's just being lazy. And so there's faults, and then there's developing your prayer. And so we have to be able to tell the difference. And sometimes, if I'm being lazy, I don't like to think I'm being lazy. And so I'm like, no, I'm cutting out the acts of faith, hope, and love because I want to be like Father James. I know everybody wants to be like me, right? Anyway, so the thing is that we want to tell am I really developing prayer or am I doing something wrong? And so that's why it's good to have a spiritual director. Because the spiritual director can help us see, and because they're more objective, they can tell the difference between is this like you've developed a fault in your prayer or are you actually growing in your prayer? We're going to move on now to something else from St. Teresa of Avila. These steps that we are taking, these beginner steps in prayer, those come from St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius is the one who teaches to pray that way, and it's a good way to start. But as we develop in prayer, we have to follow St. Teresa of Avila more and more. Because, she just has such an intense prayer life that it went very deep, to the point where she had mystical prayer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a book that's called The Mansions. I forget, there's another way of translating it in English, but I think the best thing to translate. Interior Castle. And what St. Teresa of Avila says, it says our soul is kind of like a castle or house or mansion. We could say like in different mansions, we could say the same one. And what happens is, as we develop our prayers, like we enter into different rooms in this mansion. And so when we start out, if we don't really have much of a prayer life, it's like God's given us a mansion, but we're living on the front porch. We don't ever really go inside. Maybe we have a nice rocking chair, one of those ones that you get from Cracker Barrel, buy one of those ones from Cracker Barrel, put it out on the front porch, and you sit out there. And that's nice during the summer, and the weather's good, but in the wintertime, it's not so satisfying to live on the front porch. So, little sooner or later, we discover, wait a minute, here's a door. Here's a door. And we open the door and we go in, and we discover a room that is trash. It's just like there's stuff all over the place, and it's dirty and everything. And so what do? We start cleaning it up. And we clean it up and we fix it up, make it really nice so that we can entertain Jesus there. It's like a place where we can entertain the guest, and the guest we want to entertain is Jesus. So we did new furniture, probably before that, we cleaned it up, we put out all the trash, we painted it, we put in a new carpet or flooring, whatever kind we want. And we make it all nice, we put nice pictures in there, pictures that represent me, my life, the kinds of things. Because like I said, this This is an expression of my personality as we develop our prayer. And so, what I put in that first room is an expression of my personality, just like all of you, the way your homes are decorated is an expression of your personality. And so I get this first room all set up and nice. I invite Jesus in, and Jesus and I have a great time in there. And then I find another door. And I go in that room. That room's even dirtier than the first. But then I start fixing it up. And when I fix it up, it's a nicer room than the first one was. And so now that's where I entertain Jesus. And she says there's 7 like this. As we move our way through there, it's like there's 7 rooms. So we're going to talk just a little bit about each one. Because these are our stages of prayer, and we're all in one of these stages. Most of us are not living on the front porch. If you are willing to come to a retreat, you are not living on the front porch. Okay, you're already in the first room. You might still be cleaning it up, but you're living in the first room. So the first room, what she calls the first mansion, is called worldliness. Worldliness. This person is in the state of grace, but she has many attachments. She wants to get rid of the attachments, but she hasn't gotten rid of them yet. Maybe because she's just beginning, maybe because up until now she really hasn't done any work. But the thing is, everybody in this room is at least here. Okay? Everybody might have attachments, but we want to get rid of them, but we haven't gotten rid of them yet. So at least have that attitude, like, yeah, I want to get rid of my attachments, I want to be closer to God. Welcome to the first room. Getting rid of the attachments is about cleaning up the room. So, like I say, everybody is here, and I think most of us would understand that room pretty well, because we've spent time, even if we've passed beyond it now, we spent enough time there that we understand it. And if we're still in that room, we understand it now, right? Because we're trying to clean up. The second mansion. This person this is called battleground. So the worldliness is like, haven't really gotten started yet. I think most of us actually know that. The second mansion is called battleground. So this person's in the state of grace, has attachments, and is struggling to get rid of them. So the first person has the attachments and wants to get rid of them, but hasn't really started yet. This person is actively, in the second mansion, is actively struggling to get rid of attachments. And I think everybody here is probably on that level. I don't think there's anybody who just walked in, and it's like, oh, I know I should get rid of my attachments, but I haven't really done anything yet. Maybe there's something like that, but I suppose everybody in here has done at least some work to progress in virtue, to get rid of attachments, so on. And so the prayer of this person is a little bit different. Because the person in the first mansion hasn't really started to obey God yet. She wants to obey God, but she hasn't really started doing it yet. And so she might be asking for strength. Maybe there's a situation that's holding her back. But the person in the second mansion is actively working in virtue. Lord, help me get this virtue of charity, this virtue of humility, whatever virtue it is that I need to get. Help me in this situation. She's doing work. The third mansion, or the third room, is self-dominion. This person uses her time well, spends a lot of time in prayer, practices charity, is careful in speech and dress and governance of family. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of people here who are already there. But this person is even closer to God, spends a lot more time with God. And so her prayer is deeper and much more advanced, right, than the first one. Then things start to change. And this is when it gets really tricky. It's the fourth mansion. God takes over. At the beginning of my prayer life, I am in charge of my prayer. And I decide what I'm going to pray and what I want to pray about and what I want to say in prayer. And especially at the beginning, I don't hear God's voice really clear. Little by little, I hear it more clearly, but I'm still in charge. And then at some point, God says, all right, I'm ready to take over this relationship. Sorry, you're right to be in charge of relationships. God, at a certain point, wants to take over. And so if I get to that stage and I'm still trying to say, okay, I'm going to pray in this particular time, and I'm going to pray, this is going to be the topics of prayer, whatever, things are going to start to stall out, and maybe even go backwards, because God is trying to take over and I'm not letting him. And so we're fighting over it. There's a danger when the soul moves into this mansion as it signals the change from natural to supernatural prayer. Natural prayer is the prayer I do. Supernatural prayer is the prayer that God inspires in me. The soul has a strong need of guidance and humility here. And so this is when we really start to need a spiritual direction, because this is when it can all fall apart. And so, like I say, it says here, and this is from St. Teresa, there's danger in you moving here. And this is when you find people start coming and saying, like, yeah, Father, I really don't feel like I hear God in prayer anymore, or I don't feel like I can pray anymore, and things like that, because they did the first 3 stages fine. The first 3 rooms, they worked through those rooms fine because they were in charge. And then when God takes charge, they're not used to that. And they want to see something that they're used to, but since they're not used to it, they keep trying to go back to what they know. And so they can destroy their prayer life. Like I say, this is like people, when I hear people say to me, it's like, yeah, I used to have a really good prayer life, but I don't feel like I can pray anymore. And it's not because of some situation in their life. It's like, oh, Father, when I was in college, I had a great prayer life, but since I got married and had kids, my prayer life is up in trash. It's awful. Well, I mean, that's understandable because you have all these distractions you didn't have before. But it's different when somebody is like, they had a good prayer life, and without having something like that happen to them, all of a sudden now it's difficult, and they find themselves struggling, and they can't find anything familiar. It's because God is trying to take over, and they don't know how to let him do that. I'm just going to read out the titles of the next couple of mansions, because all these mansions, the first 3 mansions you can handle kind of on your own. You really shouldn't, but you can. But after that, you really need a spiritual director. And so the 5th mansion is spiritual betrothal. The 6th is spiritual lovers, and the 7th is spiritual marriage. Okay? And if you want to read St. Teresa to find out about all that, you can, but I don't think it's useful talking about it here. Because it's the kind of thing that's so individual, it's so personal, that really needs to be something you work out with your spiritual director. You can help yourself by reading St. Teresa if you want to. But here's the thing, it's like, when St. Teresa writes this book, The Interior Paths of the Mansions, what she's talking about is her experience with prayer. And so she has certain characteristics that with her all came together in a certain way. And then when she kind of moved on to the next group, these different characteristics. With us, because we don't have the same personality, we might be a little bit more mixed. And so I might have this characteristic of a 4th mansion together with this one from the 2nd one, but most of them from the 3rd, because I'm actually in the 3rd. Okay, well, I'm not going to have the same exact experience as St. Teresa. That's why it's good to have a spiritual director to help you sort this out. Oh, and another thing is, don't get obsessed with what stage I'm in, what room am I in. And some people get into that, and that's just about pride. If you're worried about that, then like you're in the 1st mansion. You're back there because this is a relationship with God that I'm developing. And so if you're trying to develop a friendship with somebody, you're not going, and we don't even talk about it like that. If you have a friendship with somebody, you're like, what stage is our friendship in now? You know, I need to be able to chart this somehow and make a map of it. Well, we used to be friends like this, and so we were in this stage of friendship, but now we're in this stage. And I want to move it to the next stage of friendship, so I think I need to do this. No, you let the friendship develop naturally. And so that's the thing, it's like, this thing develops as it develops. I tell people, it's like, we live in an Amazon culture that whenever you want, you can ask for it today, you'll have it tomorrow at the latest. Even since we live in Atlanta, I guess there's a big warehouse close to here. Some things you get the same day here in Atlanta. So we have this Amazon mentality. We need to have a gardener's mentality or a farmer's mentality where it's like, I plant my seeds and then I work, and I work, and I work, and I work, and I work. And after weeks or months, or maybe even years, like you find an orchard or something like that. After years, maybe you get the fruits that you're looking for. But you get it by doing the work every day. And so every day we do the meditation, every day we do the work on this relationship that we try to develop a relationship. We should look at it as working. We should look like, this is my friend, and I want to develop a relationship with my friend. So these are like the steps in prayer that we need to be taking. And just some ideas about these different mansions or these different rooms that we want to look at it. The first 3 mansions are considered to be ordinary prayer or active prayer. The first mansions begin, the first 3 begin with the soul state of grace, but the souls are surrounded by sin and only starting to seek God's grace through humility in order to achieve perfection. The second mansion, so that's, I think 4 and 5, maybe, I'm not sure. But the second mansion, the second group, are the mansions of the practice of prayer, because the soul seeks to advance through the castle by daily thoughts of God. No, these are the individual ones. Sorry, I misinterpreted that. So the second mansion is the mansion of practice of prayer because the soul seeks to advance through the castle by daily thoughts of God, humble recognition of God's work in the soul, and ultimately daily prayer. The third mansion is the mansion of exemplary life, characterized through divine grace, a love for God that is so great that the soul has an aversion to both mortal and venial sin, and a desire to do works of charitable service to man, and ultimate glory of God. Remember, we talked about the three kinds of love in the spiritual exercises. Some of you will remember that, where it corresponds kind of with these things. The fourth through seventh mansions are considered to be mystical or contemplative prayer. The fourth mansion is a departure from the soul actively acquiring what it gains as God increases his role. So, like I said, the fourth mansion is when I'm not in charge anymore. God starts to be in charge. And this is the beginning of mystical or contemplative prayer. And I'm sure there are people here who are in that stage. You know, it's like, oh no, mystical prayer. Mystical prayer, according to most writers about prayer, most experts, mystical prayer is for everybody. We're not all meant to be mystics like some Teresa now, but we're all meant to have mystical prayer, and we're all meant to have contemplation. So, if you have been to the point where it's like, oh, I'm not going to have prayer like that, you're wrong. God wants us all to have this kind of prayer, this close union with him. Do a lot of people achieve like the seventh mansion? I don't know, probably not. But people actually work on this, are serious about this. It's amazing how far they can get. So the fifth mansion contains incipient union, we call that betrothal. Incipient union, which the soul prepares itself to receive gifts from God. If the fifth mansion can be compared to betrothal, because betrothal is like preparing to receive these gifts, the sixth mansion can be compared to lovers. The soul spends increasing amount of time torn between favors from God and from outside afflictions. So, the outside world is impinging on this relationship with God. But the relationship with God is becoming more and more the whole world of this person. And the things that go on outside of that are less and less important. The soul achieves clarity in prayer and a spiritual marriage with God in the seventh mansion. So, St. Teresa says this interior journey is inseparable from her love for Christ, and that the highest mansions can only be achieved by being in a state of grace through the Church's sacraments, through fervent devotion of the soul's will to him, and humbly receiving a love so great that it is beyond human capability or description. That's why sometimes in prayer, you just forget about what time it is and what's going on around you and anything like that, because you're just taken up into God. It's not like a mystical rapture or anything like that. You're just so focused on God and his goodness or whatever it might be. And we talked about thanksgiving and petition and adoration and whatever it might be. You're just so focused on that it's like time stands still. Some people, when they do adoration, they get that. But you can get that in ordinary meditation that you do during the morning. You can lose track of time. Some people have to set an alarm because otherwise they just keep going because they wouldn't realize that they're trying to run out. You get into these states where you're praying and it's like, it doesn't feel like any time is going by. And so you pray and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be late for the spiritual direction I'm supposed to do, whatever it is. Because why? Because you forgot the time and you were just praying and you're having a great time in prayer. Through prayer and meditation, the soul is placed in a quiet state to receive God's gifts. She calls them consolations of contemplation. And Teresa notes that man's efforts cannot achieve this if it is not his divine will, not God's divine will. In fact, she humbly repeats that she is never worthy of these consolations, but is always innocently grateful for them. So, we talked about how prayer starts out, how to start out in the meditation. So, and I think most all of us have started with those steps we talked about. We might not have known by specific those names as we started out that way. And then we start to realize that prayer is something that develops in a natural way. It's a relationship that has to develop. And at first it develops because I'm the one who's pushing it, because I made up my mind, I want to follow God. But at a certain point, God says, okay, you've got to this point on your own. From now on, I have to carry you if you're going to go forward. And we have to let ourselves be carried. We lose control. God takes over control. and it continues to develop. And it's also good to realize that as prayer develops beyond the beginnings, it does start to get contemplative and mystical, to the point where people can go into prayer without having to prepare points or things like that. So it's not like some people are just lazy and don't want to prepare points ahead of time, and so they don't, but they would like to say, well, it's because I'm in mystical prayer. Other people are actually to the point where they just start thinking about God, and that's enough. And they've had enough friendship with Him that they can just start thinking about how much they love God and how much He loves them, or how He's forgiven their sins and how grateful they are for that, or whatever, any attitude is a proper attitude, and they can just go there and spend time in that place. Now, like I say, don't worry about the stage you're in, and don't try like, okay, I heard that the characteristic of this stage is this, so I can push you to get this. No, you have to let it develop naturally. If you're pushing for it, a lot of times you're going to end up going backwards, you're going to mess yourself up. You just let God go at the pace He wants to go. At the beginning, you do have to do some work to be making that contact with Him, to be overcoming your defects, and so on. But as time goes by, it becomes more and more just a wonderful period of time to spend with somebody who you love deeply. And sometimes, like Mother Teresa, sometimes like Mother Teresa, she had 50 years of darkness. In other words, God didn't give her consolations in prayer. But that's Mother Teresa, that's not most of us. You know, as we reach super advanced states of prayer, we can start worrying about that. But I think for most of us, we're not like in a separate mansion. So we're not going to get long periods of darkness. We might get short periods of darkness. But try and understand that that's what it is. Talk about it with your spiritual director if you have darkness. I remember there was somebody was telling me about how, when they were a novice or something like that, they're having some difficulty in prayer. They thought, oh, I'm going through a dark night or something like that. But really, it was just like they were being lazy in prayer or something like that. So that's what I mean as spiritual directors, to help us discern these things, understand where we are in prayer, so we don't mess it up. Because the problem is that if we go much past the beginnings without help, we can mess it up pretty easy. And messing up this messes up our spiritual life. And then to get back to where we should have been, it's difficult. So I'll leave it there. Just any more announcements or something. Obviously, we'll be having a benediction. We can pray about that. And hopefully, these things will help you pray better.
I don't know about you, but these retreats have been super helpful to me. So I hope you're getting a lot out of that. And feel free to invite others, right? I just wanted to make a few announcements before we have benediction. First of all, RC Day is tomorrow, and we're looking forward to it. Quite a few RSVP. We still need some people who are willing to help serving food because of COVID. You need to serve. And I need 4 tables. So if anyone else has tables that they could bring, see me. In the back of the room, there's, sorry, somebody can do it. I don't know. In the back of the room, there are mass cards. This is really I don't know if you've looked at the news site, legionarymasses.org, but what a beautiful site they've created. And it's a way for us to support the legionaries, but also Barb Espirito at Legionary Masses. She's awesome. And she'll even mail your card and whatever you need, right, for a donation. So it's something to look at when you're in the back. Okay. The other thing is you're about to get your letter for the annual appeal. And we have a beautiful opportunity here. Something that I think is kind of unique. Because of the generosity of the people here, the gala was the biggest we've ever had. Some of you increased your monthly giving, and so for that reason, and for the gala, we were able to make our budget, which was super generous and amazing, right? And during COVID, like a lot of, I don't know if you experienced it personally, but some things I did and some I didn't. But we had legionaries going and blessing homes. I think Father Patrick alone did 70-some homes during COVID. Father David Barton in New York got COVID, and he wasn't able to leave home for 2 weeks. But then, because he had COVID, he was allowed to go into hospitals. And if it hadn't been for Father David, some of those people would have died without us, right? And some of those people would have died alone. So our missionaries all over the country were doing amazing things. Father Darren Weisbrod, he was on his bicycle. Did you see his video? On his bicycle all over Dallas, supporting people, going through neighborhoods, blessing homes, hearing confessions. It was amazing, right? And we know that in some states, lockdown lasted a lot longer. My son lives in Pennsylvania, and he still have a lot of things that they're not doing. So donations went down over the country, donations went down. Some of our benefactors really suffered for COVID with their businesses, right? And so there's a $1.2 million shortfall across the country. So what I see God doing here is something I think that's very beautiful for Atlanta. Thanks to you, we were all able to meet our budget here. But now God is having us kind of pick up our head and look out. We have 63 seminarians in Cheshire that need to be fed and clothed and taken care of, right? We have missionaries all over the country and Reverend Christie members who are trying to do what we're doing here, right? So we put a basket out here because for donations, whatever donation you can afford to give, we help give a stipend to St. Brendan's. And in a way, I mean, that's amazing and it's beautiful, but it's kind of a thank you for services, right? Because they give us the space and they take care of us. Father Anthony's over there moving chairs for us to do that confession. And so it's sort of a thank you gift for services. What's being asked in the annual appeal goes deeper than that. It's because we're looking up and we're seeing the Legion and the consecrated and Reverend Christian members across the country who are struggling. And so that's what the appeal is for, is to help them. And so you're going to receive your letter, I think it's in the next week or so. And if you can give, that would be very much appreciated by so many people across the country. And then the last little announcement is that to remember there's no December retreat. We meet again in January. And so please be open to inviting more people and to helping them understand how to go deeper in prayer with our Lord. Thank you. I'll be here if you have any questions.
You have given them bread from heaven, containing itself all divine. Let us pray. O God, with this wonderful sacrament have blessed us a memorial of your passion. Grant us, we pray, so to review the sacred histories of your body and blood, that we may always experience in ourselves the fruits of your redemption, who live and reign with God the Father in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen. Blessed be God.
Blessed be God.
Blessed be his holy name.
Blessed be his holy name.
Blessed be Jesus Christ, true God and true man.
Blessed be Jesus Christ, true God and true man.
Blessed be the name of Jesus.
Blessed be the name of Jesus.
Blessed be his most sacred heart.
Blessed be his most sacred heart.
Blessed be his most precious blood.
Blessed be his most precious blood.
Blessed be Jesus in the most holy sacrament of the altar.
Blessed be Jesus in the most holy sacrament of the altar.
Blessed be the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete.
Blessed be the Holy Spirit.
Blessed be the great Mother of God, Mary most holy.
Blessed be the great Mother of God, Mary most holy.
Blessed be her holy and immaculate conception.
Blessed be the holy and immaculate conception.
Blessed be her glorious assumption.
Blessed be her glorious assumption.
Blessed be the name of Mary, Virgin and Mother.
Blessed be the name of Mary, Virgin and Mother.
Blessed be Saint Joseph, her most chaste spouse.
Blessed be Saint Joseph, the most chaste spouse.
Blessed be God and his angels and his saints.
Blessed be God and his angels and his saints.
Lord of all, we bow before thee. Honor thyself. Infinite thy past domain, everlasting is thy reign. Infinite thy past domain,